Today, we're going to unpack how the mighty Maratha Empire was viewed from the outside looking in. Now, usually when we think of these vast, powerful empires, we look straight to their own official records, right? But the Marathas were constantly busy fighting enemies on multiple fronts, meaning sometimes those native records are kind of scarce. So to really understand this incredibly dynamic era, we have to totally flip the script.
Native records only give us part of the story. To get the whole picture, we really have to ask, how did foreign merchants, doctors, and even spies see this powerhouse? Think about it. You have these Europeans from completely different cultures just sort of stumbling into a highly sophisticated, fast-moving military state. What exactly did they see? What did they get completely wrong? And what did they accidentally manage to document for history?
Section 1. The Outsiders Looking In.
So, picture this. During the 17th and 18th centuries, various European trading companies were setting up shop along the Indian coast. And they weren't just trading, they were constantly observing, taking meticulous notes, and reporting back home. Now, these accounts generally fell into three main buckets, all written by men representing these massive global empires who were, quite frankly, marveling at the Marathas. First, we've got factory records. And no, these aren't factories making, like, widgets. They were administrative trading posts. The factors there wrote down everything, including their clashes with local rulers. Then, we have memoirs from high-ranking officials giving us their raw, unfiltered thoughts. And finally, travelogues from these adventurous merchants and physicians who wandered deep into Maratha territory.
Moving on to Section 2, French Admiration and Errors.
The French travelers and officials offer us such a fascinating mixed bag. What's truly wild is the sheer reverence officials like Abbe Carré had for Shivaji's strategic genius and courage. Carré was literally appointed Director General of the French East India Company, and he spent a massive amount of time documenting Shivaji's administration. He was just blown away by the well-defended ports and forts and the super strict discipline of the Maratha military. To him, Shivaji wasn't just some local ruler, he was an absolute titan of the East.
But, here is where it gets kind of hilarious. Because these Europeans were often operating on port city rumors, they occasionally recorded total fiction as fact. So while Abbe Carré gives us this authentic, detailed praise, you've got guys like Thevenot confidently writing down that Shivaji was born in Versailles, which is completely wrong, by the way, and even claiming he captured Shaista Khan's daughter. Because they were essentially just transcribing whatever hearsay they overheard in the trading ports, they sometimes miss the factual mark by a mile.
However, you also had these incredible, fly-on-the-wall perspectives from people like Dr. Dellon. He was a French physician who gave highly authentic, direct accounts of the military strength he witnessed firsthand. Dr. Dellon actually traveled right through the Maratha territory. He wasn't relying on gossip at the docks. He was interacting directly with the locals, and that allowed him to document campaigns and policies with a level of accuracy that historians literally still rely on today.
Section 3. The Portuguese Neighbors. Now, the Portuguese had a very unique vantage point, mainly because they were right next door. Because they were neighbors for centuries, Portuguese writers meticulously documented local administrative structures, like the village community. Writers like Lope Mendes totally recognized that the village community was the absolute bedrock of Maratha administration. This was a system that traced back to ancient times, where villages enjoyed specific rights and self-governance. And let me tell you, the Portuguese paid very close attention to how these local powers operated right on their borders.
They recorded everything from naval power to diplomatic treaties. For instance, you've got Cosme da Guarda, who wrote an early biography of Shivaji back in 1695, describing his almost magical ability to be seemingly everywhere at once. We also have Ismael Gracias detailing these fierce naval clashes. Justice Beaker documented the actual treaties forged between the Marathas and the Portuguese in 1667 and 1670. And importantly, there's the Marquis of Olorna, a Portuguese governor who didn't just praise them, but critically analyzed the inherent weaknesses and tax system flaws in the Maratha administration.
All right, Section 4, English and Dutch Records.
So the English East India Company initially just wanted to trade, but they very quickly realized you simply couldn't ignore the political reality of the Maratha Empire. These nations left behind massive, invaluable historical archives. We don't need to get bogged down in endless names, but I definitely want to highlight Dr. Fryer, an English physician who gave us incredible details on thriving trade centers like Chaul and Kalyan. And then later on, we have Grant Duff, a British political agent, who actually got direct access to the native Maratha archives in Satara, which really bridged the gap between foreign observation and native records.
The Dutch, meanwhile, they were absolutely awestruck by Maratha military agility. Eyewitnesses like Schouten noted the massive impact of their campaigns. Dutch surgeons and adventurers like de Graaf were absolutely fascinated by how the Marathas navigated conflicts with the Mughals and the Portuguese. And Schouten, who descended into the territory in 1658, actually witnessed the chaos of Shivaji's attacks on Surat firsthand, noting that these raids were going to have profound, long-lasting consequences for all trade in India.
But it definitely wasn't all just polite observation. The English records reveal a really rocky start, capturing the very real drama of factory workers getting caught right in the middle of sieges and trade disputes. When the English refused to sell Shivaji guns and instead decided to sell ammunition to his enemies during the siege of Panhala, well, Shivaji didn't just let it slide. He sent a contingent, arrested the English officials at Rajapur, and moved them from prison to prison. These factory records give us a gritty, day-to-day look at the very real tensions of the era.
Section 5. Viewing Maratha Justice.
Imagine a European mind, completely used to rigid, codified laws and massive formal courthouses, encountering the Maratha way of doing things. It was totally alien to them, but deeply fascinating. The system was wonderfully simple, blending ancient customs with a really heavy focus on amicable settlements and accessibility. The Maratha judges didn't want lawsuits dragging on forever. They acted more like patriarchs, trying to get parties to settle amicably. They relied on ancient Sanskrit text instead of strict written codes. They even permitted ancient trials by ordeals, fire and water, which absolutely had to have shocked the Europeans. But above all else, the system was accessible. Anyone, rich or poor, could walk right up and approach the Chief Justice or even the Peshwa.
Naturally, this created a fascinating split in European opinions. You had Mount Stuart Elphinstone, who looked at this system and thought it was terribly imperfect. He really hated the lack of fixed rules or formal filing procedures. But then, on the flip side, you have Dr. Hope, who looked at the exact same system and praised it for its incredible simplicity. He noted there was very little to detest, precisely because of its direct, fast access to justice.
Finally, Section 6, the European legacy.
So, a big question here. How did these men even survive to write these accounts in a landscape filled with pirates, competing armies, and rugged terrain? The answer? The passport. European writers heavily utilized these purchase safety permits to navigate massive dangers and give us the records we have today. The concept of the passport or travel license was huge during this period. Foreigners like the French traveler Abbe Carré bought these permits from Maratha officials. It guaranteed their security as they moved through heavily guarded forts and bustling ports, protecting them from highway robbers and coastal pirates, and ultimately allowing them to survive and write the history we're talking about right now.
The absolute crucial point here is that despite their flaws and despite their misunderstandings of local culture, these foreign documents are absolutely vital to our overall understanding of the era. Yes, they got things wrong. Yes, for sure, they had their own trading agendas. But because they were outside the local political system, their factory notes, diplomatic letters, and travel diaries provide an unfiltered day-to-day look at the socio-economic and military realities of the Maratha state. They show us just how formidable this empire truly was on the global stage.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to consider the next time you explore a great empire of the past. When you read history, you aren't just reading objective facts. You're always reading someone's perspective. The Maratha Empire was so incredibly impactful that it forced the greatest global powers of the day to stop, take notes, and marvel. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the lens of history.